did I tell you? Third time's the charm. You think that's supposed to make me feel better? It was 3-0. Oh, okay. 3-0, 3-1, 3-2. Doesn't really make that big of a difference. To anybody with a heart or mind, yes. 2 is a lot bigger than 0. Oh yeah, and just because I know you're going to feel so amazingly great about this, if the Golden Knights had blown that had been the first team to ever do it in the conference final. They're only the 5th team to get taken to a game 6. So, why'd you have to tell me that? I don't even want to talk about games 4 or 5 anymore. Oh, then you are really going to hate this next part. The Golden Knights looked to complete the sweep in the Western Conference Final in Game 4, and it looked like it was going to get off to a good start. Golden Knights scoring first. However, Robertson would not up the game before the end of the first period. Before, in the second period, the Golden Knights would score again to reestablish a 2-1 lead, just to have Robertson score again to tie it up at 2, and the game would remain there. Adin Hill looked very good in this game. The Golden Knights, despite sitting on a 3-0 series lead at the time, looked a little bit on the tentative side, which was a little bit odd given how much swagger they had played with, and the fact that the Florida Panthers had finished off their sweep the night prior. What was really interesting about this is there was the potential for the NHL to be thrown into scramble mode if the Golden Knights had completed their sweep, as the Stanley Cup Final from the very beginning of this postseason was slated to start on June 3rd. However, if the Golden Knights had completed this sweep, there would have been like 11 days between the last game of both conference finals and game 1 of the Stanley Cup, which would have posed a lot of logistical narrative and scheduling problem for the NHL. So I think there may have been a few bucks slid under the table to the officials in that overtime, because that wasn't an overtime caliber penalty on Braden McNabb. That was a penalty. I'll give it was a penalty, but it wasn't one that we've seen called in overtime this postseason. And ultimately, Joe Pavelski would score on the power play and extend the series to Game 5. No, I see nothing wrong with that. Last time we got to go to the Stanley Cup Final, we closed it out in Winnipeg, and it just wouldn't be the same if we didn't close it out at home this time around. I admire your optimism. Hey, how'd Game 5 go? I don't know, did you watch Game 4? Well, of course I did. We just got done talking about it. Why do you ask? Because it was the same flippin' game. It just didn't go to overtime. Who is Ty Dellandrea? Who? Yeah. So the idea of closing it out at home, that went very according to plan. Golden Knights open the scoring early and then get scored on 2 minutes later to tie it up, and then score in the second period, and then 2 minutes later get scored on, and then Adin Hill stands on his head in the third period, and then Ty Dellandrea scores not once, but twice in 2 minutes off of a crazy deflection and a horrific turnover, and it's 4-2, and that's where the game ends. And now the Golden Knights are the 5th team in history, at least in the conference final, to be forced to a Game 6 after leading 3-0. And Game 6 is on the road. Nice. So there were some interesting narratives going on during basically during the nuclear meltdown that was Game 4 and Game 5 for the Golden Knights, one of which, oddly enough, involved a familiar foe. Now, it is well documented, the rivalry between the Golden Knights and the San Jose Sharks. They go back as early as the inaugural playoff run, second round, when we beat the Sharks in 6, and then the next year in the first round, and then the whole Evander Kane, Ryan Reeves thing. I don't even know why I'm rehashing this. If you've been a Knights fan for as long as I have, you know everything about the Sharks-Golden Knights rivalry, being capped off ultimately by last year, the Sharks coming back from down 2 goals with 2 minutes to go in the third period of Game 77 of last year's regular season, and ultimately wound up costing the Golden Knights a spot in last year's playoffs. So to see this appear across the Twitter between Games 5 and 6 was a little bit problematic. Why? Like, I know they hate everything that has to do with us, but they really have to saddle up like that? Like, yeah, if we needed more motivation, that's the motivation. And going into game 6, having lost 2 games in a row, Bruce Cassidy says, and I quote, "You got to get harder, you got to play harder, you got to play less stubborn," sounding along the lines more of David Goggins rather than a hockey coach. But I digress. It's still not a must-win. It's still not a must-win. And now Game 6 at American Airlines Center is really going to be the watershed moment. If the Golden Knights win, they're on the way to their next Stanley Cup final. If they lose, they're on the way to Game 7. And Pete DeBoer is yet to lose Game 7 in his coaching career. So it's kind of important that the Golden Knights get it done. We did it! We did it! Victory is ours, buddy! We did it! Can you believe it? We actually didn't choke for once! Woo! So, it didn't take long for the Golden Knights to realize, wait a second, this is an important game, and we're going to actually play like it. And by not long, I mean, it was pretty obvious in the first shift that this game wasn't going to go the way of Game 4 or Game 5. Jeez, would you just cut that out and let the man speak? Pretty early on, Golden Knights get a good opportunity on the forecheck. Will Carrier finds the puck alone in front, basically yard sales Jake Ottinger, and he goes around him, backhands it in the net, and then Shea Theodore almost scores a couple minutes later. The puck is batted out of the air, and it was going in, and William Karlsson was there to make sure of it if it didn't. And ultimately, whether or not Theodore or Karlsson would have gotten the goal is kind of moot because Esa Lindell launches it into the 83rd row in American Airlines Center for a delayed game penalty. Golden Knights make them pay. William Karlsson scores on the power play. And then, fourth line. Fourth line was having an amazing game already. And I'm fairly certain if it wasn't Keegan Kolesar and William Carrier pulling this off, and say it was Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, it would have been goal of the year. Keegan Kolesar takes the puck, skating out from from the defensive zone to the offensive zone, chips a bank pass off the far boards, which hits Will Carrier in stride, who then backhand sauces it past Miro Heiskanen to the stick of a streaking Keegan Kolesar, who had filled the lane on the weave play. He risks it past Jake Ottinger for a 3-0 lead. Again, if it had been, Crosby Malkin, I would have believed it. If it had been McDavid Draisaitl, if it had been Matthews and Marner, it had been the goal of the decade. But it's 2 fourth-line guys on the Golden Knights. So do with that information what you will. Regardless, the score is 3-0 at that point. And then in the second period, Jonathan Marchessault piles on even more so, basically putting it through the wickets on Jake Ottinger on a really good feed pass from Ivan Barbashev on a 2-on-1 break-in. And oddly enough, after a busy first period, that was the only goal in the second period. Go figure. And then in the third period, it was very obvious that the game was over. It's 4-0 already. Other YouTubers that I frequent that talk about hockey in the grand scheme of things are already proclaiming the Golden Knights as their winner of the Western Conference. And I'm screaming internally saying there's 20 minutes to go. We've already blown this once before in our history. Back to the 5-minute major. We gave up 4 goals on that. But anyway, William Karlsson scoring on a good feed from Michael Amadio just a few minutes into the third period, going absolute top cheese shelf on Jake Ottinger. Really helped put the nerves at ease. And then with 7 minutes to go, Michael Amadio picks up the pieces on what was a pretty crumbled offensive zone play, chips it over Ottinger. It's 6-0. And at that point, the game is over. Well, I mean, it's not over because Aiden Hill's still working on a pretty good game. And as the time wound down, the Stars continued to pile it on a little bit, but really, they knew it was over. And unlike Game 3, the Stars fans did not litter the ice with popcorn and beer, but rather, as time wound down, rose to their feet and cheered on their team one last time as the Golden Knights win Game 6, 6-0. 6-0. Just to help wash away all the memories of Game 4 and Game 5 where we couldn't score worth anything. Golden Knights get their hats, they shake hands. Oddly enough, Mark Stone and Jamie Benn do exchange pleasantries afterwards, unlike Alex Pietrangelo and Leon Draisaitl in the round prior. There's an image that really kind of sums it up. It was kind of a establishing shot on the ESPN broadcast at the time. It just shows Bruce Cassidy standing on center ice looking up. And I've got a more enhanced picture that I took off of the Golden Knights Twitter page here. And I just can't imagine what's going through his head. Bruce got fired from the Bruins last year after winning the Eastern Conference Championship in 2019. He comes to this new team, and in his first year here, he gets to go play for the Stanley Cup Final. I just can't imagine what's going through his head. And obviously, there's a lot more narratives going on. Obviously, he's an incredible coach, and nobody knows why he got fired yet, aside from, goodness, if I know. All I know is we'll take him, honestly. We'll take him. And he's piloted this crew through adversity and has, led them pretty good through a 12-5 record through the first 3 rounds. That ain't bad. And just 4 wins away from the Stanley Cup. But the Golden Knights do have a trophy presented in front of them first, and the way that this interaction went was pretty good. I don't want to touch it. No, bad. Yeah, nobody touched the trophy. Unlike the Eastern Conference champion Florida Panthers and the Prince of Wales trophy, the Golden Knights did not even come within a 5-foot circle of the Campbell Bowl. I think it's because they've learned their lesson in 2018 when they made the Cup final in their inaugural season. Derek Englund took that trophy, skated laps around Winnipeg, took it into the locker room, everybody took their pictures, and then the Golden Knights lost in 5 to the Washington Capitals, much to the chagrin of 17-year-old me. But anyway, so nobody touched the trophy, and there's a picture, I'll see if I can find it, of what looks to be Alex Pietrangelo and Riley Smith holding back Mark Stone. I know that's not what happened, but it'd be really funny if that's what it was. They're like, no, Mark, don't do it, Mark. Obviously, there's a lot of leadership on that team. There's plenty of Stanley Cups in that room to say, hey, don't touch it. I mean, I'm sure Chandler Stevenson went up to Mark right as the time was winding down and said, hey, remember the last time this franchise touched it? I got a Stanley Cup ring because of it. And I'm sure Jonathan Quick, Alec Martinez, Alex Pietrangelo, Ivan Barbashev, all the Golden Knights players who have won Stanley Cups also didn't touch the Campbell Bowl after winning the Western Conference. And so obviously there's a bit of a trend there. So we have the oldest narrative in the book of, are you jinxed for touching the trophy or are you not jinxed for touching the trophy? One of those is going to hold true. And another thing is some franchises are going to win their first Stanley Cup. The Vegas Golden Knights went to the last Stanley Cup in 2018, and the Florida Panthers went to their last one in 1996 when they got swept by the Colorado Avalanche. Now, that's a story for another video, which will be coming out very shortly, breaking down what is set to be a very interesting Stanley Cup final. But one thing I do have to say is that this, aside from being right, if you go back to my series prediction, I guessed Golden Knights in 6. Now, I didn't assume we would take a 3-0 series lead and then win in 6, but I'll take a hollow victory, even though it's still a victory. On a more serious note, though, I honestly, as a diehard Golden Knights fan, I have to thank the Dallas Stars for an incredible series. If we played this series again, it could go the other way, 100%. 2 fluke bounces in overtime in game 1 and 2. If those go a different way, it's 2-0 Dallas heading back to American Airlines Center instead of 2-0 Vegas. And these games were so tight, and the only games that really got out of hand were game 6 and game 3. And every other game was essentially a toss-up between these two incredible franchises. Obviously, Pete DeBoer said some very nice things about the Golden Knights, wishing them luck in the Stanley Cup final. And it's easy to say that, especially because it's the team that he just got done coaching. And as a fan, it's nice to hear, but it's also nice to give credit where credit's due. Roope Hintz had an incredible postseason. Jason Robertson got himself back together and had 6 goals in the Western Conference final after having 2 in the first 2 rounds. I don't know what's going on with Jake Ottinger. He was brilliant in games 4 and 5 and then laid the world's largest egg in game 3 and game 6. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume he was hurt or dealing with something. Dallas is going to be back. They're a really storied franchise. They've got enough talent. Joe Pavelski is going to win a Stanley Cup one day. I don't know if it's going to be with the Dallas Stars or with wherever he winds up next, assuming he winds up anywhere else. And I can't believe I'm saying that as a Knights fan, and he's the reason we lost in the first round in 2019. But anyway. The fact of the matter is it was an incredible series, and it could have gone either way. It was much more competitive than the Eastern Conference final. And from one fan base to another, we're going to go try and win it for you guys, even though you guys won't get any of the credit for it. You guys were, assuming we have the privilege of hoisting the Stanley Cup in the next 2 weeks, it'll be because you guys in the Dallas Stars got us ready and made us prove our worth to be there in the first place. And so for that, I almost kind of have to say thanks for the help. And I hope you guys have a good off season. I hope the golf course is nice, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. Thanks. So, what do we do now? Because we're 4 wins away from the Stanley Cup. Game 1's on Saturday. Game 2's on Monday. And then there's a couple of days off. And then game 3 and 4 in Sunrise. I have no idea what's going to happen in this series. And I will probably put up a series prediction like I have for every single series to this point. Probably tomorrow, as I'm going to be slightly indisposed of, especially right at the start, or between now and the start of the Stanley Cup final, getting mentally and emotionally ready for what could be one of the most exciting series in NHL and Golden Knights history. If we win twice, we're closer than we ever got. We win once, we're equally as close as we were in 2018. I would not expect this to be a fun series. Matthew Tkachuk's a great player, but who knows? Who knows? But that's an adventure for another day, and that's a discussion for another video. The odds have come out. I haven't looked at them. I'm absolutely not putting any money on this series because the NHL is nothing if not parity at this point. And ultimately, it'll just be to see who is worthy of lifting the Stanley Cup in a couple of weeks. But that's for another video. As for this video, if it isn't clear enough already, Golden Knights win the series 4-2 in Game 6 by a final score of 6-0, and are on their way to their second Stanley Cup final in 6 years. I wonder if Bill was right. He said playoffs in 3, which he got that one wrong. It was playoffs in 1. But he said cup in 6, and he's a pretty smart dude. I wonder if we can prove him right. Get comfy, buddy. Get comfy. It is going to be a long 2 weeks.